Well, hello. Now that we've got you safely tucked into this new podcast, I wanted to revisit this whole overarching word picture of the name of the podcast, which is Finding Traction. You know, I started the first episode with that clip from American Graffiti of two guys that were challenging each other to a drag race, screeching tires and all. And I know that tires are a big part of racing. I'm not a huge NASCAR or Indy fan, but I know it's huge, especially down south. I've watched a few races, and I think I know all of a sudden if it starts to rain, now some of you can correct me, if it starts to rain, they need different tires when the conditions change in the weather. So for example, in the middle of the race, it starts to rain. All of a sudden you get all these drivers pulling in and taking pit stops, quickly changing their tires for a different kind of tire for different road conditions. Otherwise, they won't stay on the road. At least that's what I'm told. All of those racing pictures, although, they weren't really the idea of what I had when I thought about the words finding traction. I had more of a Canadian snow motif in mind, so I got to explain that. Up here in Canada, of course, it snows a lot, and it's very easy to get stuck or leave the road, especially in certain parts of the country. And I think recovery from porn is a lot like learning to choose the right tires for the road conditions of life. In winter climates like where I grew up, summer tires were not a good option, something that you could rely on. Now, I guess if you lived in California or down south, you don't need to worry about snow and mountain passes. So, just work with me here for a second. And it seems like sometimes people in life seem to get along just with snow tires. When it comes to sexual struggles and unwanted behaviors, things that have plagued me my whole life, these people seem to drive around with summer snow tires and they never seem to have a problem. Well, that's just not my experience. Some people take a little bit more of a cautious approach and they drive around with all-season tires. They are more careful. They want to be prepared just in case. And in this example, these are people who don't normally need the extra tread, but they're aware that they could struggle, so they stay clear of things that they know might become addictive. So they are, and they seem generally with all season tires to get along just fine. Then there's those who find themselves in conditions that need winter tires. They realize they're facing road conditions that require extra care and preparation lest they end up leaving the road. This could be examples of people who hit rough patches in their life or go through different seasons, and they find themselves slipping into destructive patterns or addictive patterns. And that's really what I spent a couple weeks talking about in terms of what happens when our life situation changes. Now, with the help of a tow truck and some clear instruction, to drive slower and be more careful, usually these people find themselves getting back on the road. Usually with the care of a supportive network, they're able to regain a certain amount of equilibrium in their life. And then there's those that, they need all the help they can get. And I put myself in that category. You need four-wheel drive. You need posi track. You need studded snow tires. And you still at times need a tow truck. You've done things in the past that have consistently caused you to leave the road. And you're unable, apparently, from my experience in my life, to get easily back onto the road. Once I even tried to pass a snowplow because it was going too slow. It didn't end well. I ended up in the ditch and the snowplow driver just shook his head and kept driving. So I have learned the hard way. I need all the help I can get. And I guess for this example of tires, it's for people like me who find these addictive patterns so embedded in their life that no amount of careful driving can keep you on the road. It's for those kind of people that I created this podcast, Finding Traction. And it's for those kind of people that I created the course of the same name to help people get back on the road and stay on the road, especially for the first year of their recovery. No, this is not a podcast about Michelin or Goodyear tires. It is all about learning to find the right recovery tires to match whatever climate you're in. Let me give you an example. About 3 years ago, I ended up switching to a system where I turned off all of my internet access without a password. I could go to only a few select sites, and the reason was I couldn't handle the temptation of having all of those image searches available to me and all of those porn sites just being a click away, or even edging towards looking for things. And so that was a system that I needed. Now, having said that, about 3 years ago, I began to get some new equilibrium, and I began to change some of the tires or the tools. I switched over, actually used a Covenant Eyes. I switched over to a system that used a combination of content filtering and screen accountability. It gave me a little more freedom, and to this point, it's worked out okay. Having said that, I've noticed recently that I've started to get the idea that I should start using a bit of that extra freedom to start edging. So what I've done is I've talked to some of my accountability buddies and say, if I find myself edging with this new system, I need to go back and put some different tires on. And I may need to go back to a bit of a more restrictive system and set of guidelines. I have to match whatever my tools are to what I'm experiencing. We're in the middle of this whole COVID virus right now, and you see this whole same idea, the challenge. If we loosen up restrictions, then we can find the virus taking hold again. And then that might result in us having to dial back and end up with more restrictive measures. Personal freedoms aside, it's a good word picture. The virus is something that seeks to take us out. So that's the whole idea that we've been talking about in this whole course, Finding Traction. This whole website, this whole podcast is to help you find the traction that you need. Let me give you another example about using the appropriate tires. So, switching tires. Conversation I had this morning with the guy who's in the middle of his 30s. He's in the middle of a great season of life, demands, responsibilities. He's got this pressing job. He's got 3 kids. They're all school age. He's got a wife who's now struggling with the kids at home and having to learn at home. And for him, me time feels like a thing of the past. And for him, porn is a chance to escape, to turn away from all the suffocating demands, and go to Magic Land, so to speak. So what do you think he needs? What are the tires that he needs at this place and point in his life? Well, for him, he needs to learn to carve out some positive and renewing self-care activities so that so that his me time activities don't end up with a heck of a blowback. That's what he needs. He needs to develop some real positive, affirming, life-giving things that are helpful to him. So that's an example of how he has to look at the tires he has on and going, are these serving me in my journey in life right now? So he also needs to look at maybe some mistaken beliefs. Am I out of just whatever, adding responsibility after responsibility to an already overwhelming life? So those are examples of, from my life in terms of some of my internet stuff, and then from this other guy's life as well. So here's the question for you. What kind of tires do you need for your recovery? Are you somebody who's just skating through life right now and doesn't need much help staying on the road? Well, that's great. But you're probably not listening to this podcast if that's you. Maybe you're the type that needs studded snow tires, chains, and the occasional tow truck. Just don't pass them. Not a good idea. I need all those things. And I still find it tough at times. Every week I have at least 2 groups where I'm keeping real time with people regarding my addictive struggles. And those people act as some sort of a pit crew, so to speak, and in terms of the support I need in my life. So if you're needing some extra help, let me give you a couple ideas and resources that could be helpful. If you go on the website bandofbrothers.care and you go through to /finding free, FREE hyphen downloads. You will find there's something called basic training. And that's just a very quick primer that you can download to get you started. There's also other worksheets on there and other resources that could be of help. That's bandofbrothers.care/free-downloads. Finally, if you're interested and you like the approach I take, I really would invite you to take the Finding Traction course. It includes 52 12 to 15-minute videos, and we walk through issues of understanding, connection, and healing to really help cement the recovery in your life. Let me say this with the best bit of Canadian humility that I can muster up. I really think that it is the most accessible course out there. For the average guy that doesn't want to spend 2 hours doing homework or reading piles of stuff, that doesn't want to wade through piles of information, I've done most of that work for you. I point you to a few helpful resources in addition to some of the topics that I bring up. If you purchase Q1, I've also offered to do a free Zoom call with you just to get you started, and all that information, again, is on the website. So we're going to start on this podcast. We'll do some basic topics like this, and then I'll also be throwing out what I call life hacks. Those are just 5 to 6 minute videos where I take different lessons and I just give you a fun little snapshot from the different lessons as a bit of a taste test. When you go to Costco, they give you those little things that you can taste. So here's the Finding Traction. I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email at bandofbrothers@shaw.ca. That's SHAW.ca. And to quote a great Canadian blast from the past musician, Tom Cochrane, life is a highway. So let me know how I can help you stay on the road to life. Take care.